This year, the Reverend Mr. Horn published his letter to Mr. Dunning on the English particle. Johnson read it, and though not treated in it with sufficient respect, he had candor enough to say to Mr. Seward, "Were I to make a new edition of my dictionary, I would adopt several of Mr. Horn's etymologies. I hope they did not put the dog in the pillory for his libel. He has too much literature for that." Footnote here. In Mr. Horn's Trook's enlargement of that letter, which he has since published with the title of some Greek words that translate to winged words, or the diversions of Curly, he mentions this compliment as if Dr. Johnson, instead of several of his etymologies, had said all. His recollection, having thus magnified it, shows how ambitious he was of the approbation of so great a man. On Saturday, May 16th, I dined with Johnson at Mr. Beauclerk's with Mr. Langton, Mr. Stevens, Dr. Higgins, and some others. I very feelingly every instance of my remissness in recording his memorabilia. I am afraid it is the condition of humanity, as Mr. Wyndham of Norfolk once observed to me after having made an admirable speech in the House of Commons, which was highly applauded, but which he afterwards perceived might have been better, that we are more uneasy from thinking of our wants than happy in thinking of our acquisitions. This is an unreasonable mode of disturbing our tranquility and should be corrected. Let me then comfort myself with the large treasure of Johnson's conversation, which I have preserved for my own enjoyment and that of the world, and let me exhibit what I have upon each occasion, whether more or less, whether a bulse or only a few sparks of a diamond. John said, Dr. Mead lived more in the broad sunshine of life than almost any man. The disaster of General Burgoyne's army was then the common topic of conversation. It was asked why piling their arms was insisted upon as a matter of such consequence, when it seemed to be a circumstance so inconsiderable in itself. Johnson said, "Why, sir, a French author says, il est beaucoup de prédilitis dans les guerres." I forgot. Just remind me again. I keep on forgetting to translate these French. Maybe I won't even bother. Yeah, if I think about it, I'll do it. I'm like 2 days behind now, though. All distinctions are trifles, because great things can seldom occur, and those distinctions are settled by custom. A savage would as willingly have his meat sent to him in the kitchen as eat it at the table here. I wouldn't mind. As men become civilized, various modes of denoting honorable preferences are invented. He this day made the observations upon the similarity between Rasselas and Candide, which I have inserted in its proper place when considering his admirable philosophical rants. I think that happened earlier, although there's not a footnote that tells us this. When you think there would be one. Johnson said Candide, he thought, had more power in it than anything that Voltaire had written. He said, "The lyrical part of Horace never can be perfectly translated. So much of the excellence is in the numbers and the expression. Francis has done it best. I'll take his 5 out of 6 against them all." On Sunday, May 16th, I presented him Mr. Fullerton of Fullerton, who has since distinguished himself so much in India, to whom he naturally talked of travels, as Mr. Bryden accompanied him in the tour of Sicily and Malta. He said, "The information which we have from modern travelers is much more authentic than what we had from ancient travelers. Ancient travelers guessed, modern travelers measure." Dexter. "The Swiss admit that there is but one error in Stanion. If Bryden were more attentive to the Bible, he would be a good traveler." He said, "Lord Chatham was a dictator. He possessed the power of putting the state in motion. Now there is no power. All hope of a change to the better Johnson said, "Why, yes, sir. When we are weary of this relaxation." Maybe I can. There we go. City of London will appoint its mayors again by seniority. I said, "But is not that taking a mere chance for having a good or a bad mayor?" And Johnson said, "Yes, sir, but the evil of competition is greater than that of the worst mayor that can come. Besides, there is no more reason to suppose that the choice of a rabble will be right than the choice that chance will be right." I love how anti-democratic Johnson is. I mean, I don't, but he makes some good points. But on Tuesday, May 19th, I was to start for Scotland in the evening. Johnson was engaged to dine with me at Mr. Dilly's. I waited upon him to remind him of his appointment and attend thither. He gave me some salutary counsel and recommended vigorous resolution against any deviation from moral duty. I said, "But you would not have me to bind myself by a solemn obligation?" Johnson, much agitated, said, "What? A vow? Oh, no, sir, a vow is a horrible thing. It's an error for sin. The man who cannot go to heaven without a vow may go." Here, standing erect in the middle of his leg and rolling grand, his pause was truly a curious compound of the solemn and the ludicrous. He half whistled in his usual way, when pleasant, and he paused as if checked by religious awe. I humored Mama. "What, sir?" said I, "in calum juris it," alluding to his imitation of it, "and bid him to go to hell he goes." And the original Latin is, "and bid him to go to heaven he will go," from Juvenal Satires. Yeah, not sure I understand that part. I had mentioned to him a slight, I guess that, well, I know, I understand that Johnson doesn't swear, so he didn't want to swear there. And I guess, could be wrong here, but I guess what Boswell doing here was saying, quoting Juvenal to remind Johnson the opposite of what Juvenal was saying, I guess. I had mentioned to him a slight fault in his noble imitation of the 10th satire of Juvenal. Oh, speaking of Juvenal still. A too near recurrence of the verb spur, description of the young youtheists of college. "Through all his veins, the fever of renown spreads from the strong contagion of the gown. Or boldly dome his future labors spread, and Bacon's mansion trembled over his head." Johnson had desired me to change spreads to Burns, but for perfect authenticity, I now had it done with his own hand. This slip of paper on which he made the correction is deposited to me in the noble library to which it relates, into which I had presented other pieces of his handwriting. It says in a later footnote says, from a later editor says, the slip of paper was presented to the Bodleian in 1947 by Lieutenant Colonel R.H. Isham. I thought this alteration not only cured the fault, but was more poetical, as it might carry an allusion to the shirt by which Hercules was inflamed. So they changed spread to Burns there, I guess. So say, or Bodley's dome, his future labors burns, I guess is now what it would say. Or are they saying at the beginning when the first spreads? Through all means the fever of renown burns from the strong contagion of the gown. I guess it would be that one, maybe. Or maybe both, I don't know. We had a quiet, comfortable meeting at Mr. Dilly's. Nobody there but ourselves. Mr. Dilly mentioned somebody having, with Milton's tractate on education, should be printed along with his poems in the edition of the English poets then going on. Johnson said, "It would be breaking in upon the plan, but would be of no great consequence. So far as it would be anything, it would be wrong. Education in England has been in danger of being hurt by two of its greater men, Milton and Locke. Milton's plans is impracticable." So the word is impracticable, not impractical here. It's impracticable. And I suppose has never been tried. Locke's, I fancy, has been tried often enough, but is very imperfect. It gives too much to one side and too little to the other. It gives too little to literature. I shall do what I call for Dr. Watts, but my materials are very scanty. His poems are by no means his best works. I cannot praise his poems itself highly, his poetry itself highly, but I can praise its design. My illustrious friend and I parted with assurance of affectionate regard. That means they made out. No, I don't even think they hug, you know. Handshakes. Did they even handshake back then? Probably just did one of these. I wrote to him on the 25th of May from Thorpe in Yorkshire, one of the seats of Mr. Boswell. Boswell, not Boswell. And gave him an account of my having passed a day at Lincoln unexpectedly, and therefore without having any letters of introduction, but that I had been honored with civilities from the Reverend Mr. Simpson, an acquaintance of his, and Captain Broadley of the Lincolnshire Militia, but more particularly from the Reverend Dr. Gordon, the Chancellor, who first received me with a great politeness as a stranger. When I informed him who I was, entertained me at his house with the most flattering attention. I also expressed the pleasure with which I have found that our worthy friend Langton was highly esteemed in his own country, or county, town. And now I will stop here just for a little, bring to a milestone. We're on page 1. Let's see, I probably read a little bit more than that because I don't think the introduction was, the introduction was in Roman numerals. So we're actually, technically past reading 1,000 pages, but no small feat. And we only got, not that much more to go, really. About 400 more pages. 402. It's going to be sad. Just fly by like that now. And tomorrow, important anniversary as well, but I'll get that later tomorrow, if I remember. Anyway, here's the letter. To Dr. Samuel Johnson, Edinburgh, June 18th, 1778. My dear sir, there's ellipsis here, which means he... Since my return to Scotland, I have had more conversation with Thompson's sister. It is strange that Murdoch, who was his intimate friend, should have mistaken his mother's maiden name, which he says was Hume, whereas Hume was the name of his grandmother by the mother's side. His mother's name was Beatrix Trotter, not Harry Potter or Beatrix Potter, Beatrix Trotter, a daughter of Mr. Trotter of Fogo, a small proprietor of land. Says here in a footnote, Dr. Johnson was by no means attentive to minute accuracy in his lives of the poets, for notwithstanding my having detected this mistake, he has continued. Thompson had a brother who he had with him in England as his amanuensis, but he was seized with a consumption, and having let them, Strathaven, one to Mr. K. Thompson, master of the grammar school at Lanark. Uh-oh. My connection's been shitty here recently. I don't know what's going on. I just got a message that said my connection was bad. So I guess I'll read the last sentence just in case. Don't want to miss anything. He had 3 sisters, one married to Mr. Bell, minister of the parish of Strathaven, one to Mr. Craig, father of the ingenious architect, who gave the plan of the new town of Edinburgh, and one to Mr. Thompson, master of the grammar school at Lanark. He was of a humane and benevolent disposition, not only sent valuable presents to his sisters, but a yearly allowance in money, and was always wishing to have it in his power to do them right. Lord Littleton's observation that he loathed much to write was very true. His letters to sister, Mrs. Thompson, were not frequent, and in one of them he says, "All my friends who know me," and one of these says, "All my friends who know me know how bad I am to going into holy orders." From this late interview with his sister, I think much more favorably of him, and I hope you will, as I hope you will. I am eager to see more of your prefaces to the poets. I solace myself with the few proof sheets which I have. I send a parcel of Lord Annals, which you will please to return to me as soon as you conveniently can. He says he wishes you would cut a little deeper, but he may be proud that little occasion to use that critical knife. I ever am, my dear sir, your faithful and affectionate humble servant, James Boswell. Danger to the wind. That's not the expression. What is the expression? Hazard to the wind? I can't remember. And read the next letter, even though I'm not sure if my internet's working properly. Langton has been pleased to favor me with some particulars of Dr. Johnson's visit. I'm getting that message again. I got the message again. Oh, maybe I should just stop for now until I figure out what's going on with my internet. So I'll stop for today. Figure out what's going on. Until next time, bye from Bob.